I have been a long-haul truck driver for 16 years. I have driven through every kind of night rainstorm and fog this country can throw at a man, but nothing ever unsettled me like what happened on that highway last winter. I still don't know if it was a hallucination or something that reached out from whatever lies behind the thin wall we call reality. I just know that since that night, I haven't taken that route again. It started on a cold stretch of interstate somewhere between two small towns. I had been driving for almost 10 hours straight when I saw the sign exit 47 Millcross loop. The name didn't ring a bell, but I figured it was a good place to stretch and maybe grab coffee. The highway was empty and quiet, the snow falling just enough to blur the lines of the road. I took the exit. The ramp curved sharply down, then bent right around a small stand of pines. After about half a mile, it connected to another road, except there were no lights, no buildings, nothing but dark forest and some of my own tires on wet asphalt. I thought maybe the main road was just ahead, but when I checked my GPS, the screen was gray blank. It wasn't even showing I was on a mapped road anymore. I drove a little farther until the road curved again, and when I came out of it, I saw the same sign, ahead, exit 47 Millcross Loop. I thought I made a wrong turn somehow and circled back to the interstate. So I turned around and tried to retrace my path, but the forest looked identical in every direction. I followed what should have been the way out, only to find myself back at that same curve. It happened 3 more times before I stopped the truck and stepped out. The cold hit me hard, the air heavy and quiet, too quiet, like the snow was swallowing every bit of sound. The forest on both sides looked endless, thick black trunks stretching into gray nothingness. When I stood still, I could feel a faint vibration under the ground, a low hum. That wasn't from my engine. I got back in the cab and checked the clock. It said 147. I looked away for a second, then back, and it still said 147. The second hand wasn't moving. I restarted the engine and drove again, slower this time, the headlights carving tunnels through the falling snow. But no matter how many turns I took or how far I went, that same sign kept appearing, exit 47 Millcross Loop. The strangest part was how the world outside seemed to change just slightly each time I passed it. Once the sign leaned left instead of right, once the paint was flaked and peeling, once the trees looked closer to the road than before, and each time I felt more and more certain that I wasn't retracing a route at all, but being pulled through something that was folding in on itself. After the 5th loop, I stopped in the middle of the road and cut the engine off. The silence was heavy, pressing down like a weight. I leaned forward against the wheel, trying to steady my breathing, and that's when I heard a faint and low voice coming from outside, but not from any direction. It sounded like someone whispering my name just behind the door. I froze. It said my name again, slower this time, clearer. The sound didn't echo. It just sank into the air like it was being swallowed by the night. I wanted to check, but something deep inside told me not to. That whatever was out, there wasn't a person. I stayed like that for a long time, staring through the windshield until the voice stopped. When I finally looked at the clock again, it had changed 148. The seconds started moving again like nothing had happened. I turned the key and the engine roared back to life. The headlights hit the sign one more time, exit 47 Millcross Loop. But now there was something new underneath the name, scratched into the green metal deep. Jagged letters like they'd been carved with a knife. Keep driving. The words were rough, uneven, as if someone had done it fast, desperate. The edges of the metal curled where the letters dug too deep. I just sat there staring, trying to convince myself it was a prank, maybe local kids, maybe an old sign vandalized years ago. But the snow was too fresh. There were no footprints, no tire marks around it, no signs of anyone ever having been here. I kept driving for hours, or what felt like hours, until the forest began to blur together into one endless black wall, every curve leading back to the same sign, every mile stretching longer than the one before the gas needle dropped slowly, too slow. I knew I should have run out long ago, but the truck kept running and the hum beneath the tires grew louder, more alive. I thought I saw lights once far ahead, white and flickering like headlights, but as I approached they didn't move, they hung in the air between the trees, pale and still, then blinked out completely. When I was within a few feet of them, I slammed the brakes and nearly lost control of the rig, and the truck stopped. There was nothing there, just mist curling up from the asphalt like breath. That's when I started to understand this wasn't a loop of road. It was something else, something imitating one, a trap, maybe, or a crack in the world where time twisted back on itself. I don't know, but the longer I stayed, the more it felt like something was watching from the trees, waiting for me to stop long enough for it to step closer. I tried to sleep in the cab, but every time my eyes closed, I felt the air change, like the truck was moving even though the engine was off. Once I woke up and saw frost forming on the inside of the windshield, shapes like handprints smeared down for the top edge, like something was crawling over the roof looking in. When I wiped them away, they left faint streaks of red beneath the frost. That's when I stopped trying to rest. I turned the key and kept driving, praying for dawn or another sign, any sign that wasn't exit 47 Millcross Loop. But as the road unrolled beneath me and the forest tightened, I realized dawn wasn't coming, not here, not ever, and somewhere far ahead. I thought I saw a figure standing in the middle of the next curve, pale, motionless, facing my headlights, waiting for me to finish the loop again. I thought maybe it was exhaustion making me see things. Maybe the pale shape on the curve was a trick of light reflecting off the snow. But when I slowed down and squinted through the windshield, I could tell it was a person standing dead center on the road ahead of me. The air around him seemed still heavier, like everything had frozen for miles in either direction. I hit the brakes, the truck shuttered, the headlights washed over the figure, revealing more detail. He was wearing something dark, maybe a coat or a uniform. I couldn't tell. The fabric seemed wet, like it clung to his body, but not from rain. He didn't move, not even to shield his face from the glare. When the truck stopped about 20 feet away, I waited for him to react, to wave or walk off the road, but he just stood there, head slightly tilted to the side, as if listening for something. Then he turned slowly toward me, and I swear I could feel that same low vibration in the ground rise up through the cab into my chest, the hum I'd been hearing since the first loop. It grew stronger the longer I looked at him. His face was pale like wax, the skin stretched too tight across the bone, and where his eyes should have been, there was only shadow, not holes, not empty sockets, just a deep moving dark that swallowed the light. The edges of his face rippled slightly, as if the air around him wasn't still, but bending. I couldn't look away. I leaned forward without realizing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, and as I did, his head twitched fast, unnatural. His mouth opened wide, as if to scream, but no sound came out, just a long, silent stretch of darkness inside him, deeper than his eyes. Then he closed his mouth again and raised his hand. It was shaking, but deliberate, his index finger pointing down the road behind me. I don't know why I looked, but when I did, I saw something I can't explain. The road behind me wasn't empty anymore. There were faint lights, dozens of them flickering in the tree line. Not headlights, but smaller, like lanterns or candles, and in between them I could make out shapes, tall, thin, too many of them standing perfectly still, facing the road like they'd been waiting there the whole time. I looked back to the man, but he was gone, the hum still pulsing through the air. I threw the truck into reverse, but the tires spun uselessly on the wet pavement. It was like something was holding the wheels in place, keeping me there. I tried again, harder, the cab vibrating with the effort, until suddenly the resistance vanished and the truck lurched backward. I didn't even think, I just hit the gas and sped off down the curve, praying that this time the road would lead somewhere different. But when I reached the bottom of the hill and saw the green glow of a sign through the fog, my stomach turned. Exit 47 Millcross Loop. The words seemed brighter than before, the letters almost pulsing faintly like they were breathing. I drove past it faster, refusing to look at the scratched words beneath, even though I could feel them watching me. Keep driving, that phrase stuck in my head like an echo I couldn't shake as I circled the loop again and again. I started to notice little changes in the world each time the trees would move slightly closer to the road, or the snow would vanish, completely replaced by damp pavement, reflecting something unseen above. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of figures between the trunks, people, maybe, or silhouettes pacing parallel to my path. At one point, I passed an old gas station on the right, something I hadn't seen before. It looked half collapsed, the windows boarded, the sign hanging by one chain. I stopped there, hoping maybe I'd found a way out. I stepped out into the cold again, the smell of something sour, metallic, thick in the air, the kind of scent that sits in the back of your throat and doesn't leave the front door of the station was open. Slightly swinging on broken hinges, I pushed it, and the sound it made seemed too loud in the empty night inside was dust and darkness. Shelves half fallen, a cash register covered in grime, the lights overhead were dead. But I could hear something faint deeper inside, not a hum this time, but a slow, steady drip. I followed it down the aisle to the back door, where a single light flickered the bulb. Hanging from an exposed wire underneath it sat a small round puddle of dark liquid, too dark to be water. It dripped from the ceiling, steady and deliberate. I looked up, and there on the ceiling above me was another sign just like the one outside, but bent, torn, covered in streaks of rust, or maybe blood. Exit 47 Millcross Loop. And behind it a whisper so soft I thought it might be the wind. But it wasn't wind. The whisper said, "Don't stop." That was when every light in the building snapped on at once, flooding the aisles and harsh white the shelves now full of things that hadn't been there before. Food wrappers, drinks, tools, everything new, untouched, like the place had never been abandoned. I backed away toward the door, my eyes catching on the glass of a cooler door where something moved inside. It wasn't a reflection. It was someone else. Looking back from the other side, same face as mine, but the version of me in the glass wasn't breathing. Right, his chest rose, slow, too slow, then stopped completely before exhaling a thick fog that spread across the inside of the cooler door. His lips moved, but the words came from behind me, this time louder, closer. "Keep driving." The lights cut out again. The drip returned. I bolted out of there into the freezing air, jumped into the truck, and started it. I didn't look back, even when I heard footsteps running after me. I just drove the wheels, kicking up mist and dirt, the headlights cutting through black. When I merged back onto the empty road, the forest opened slightly ahead, and for a moment I thought I saw another car, taillights blinking through the fog. I followed them, desperate to catch up. But as I got closer, I realized they weren't moving away. They were reversing, matching my speed. The closer I got, the clearer they became, until I could see that they weren't attached to a car at all. They were just lights floating inches above the ground. And when I blinked, they were gone. The road stretched endlessly forward into the same curve that always led back to that same sign. And somewhere deep in the woods beside me, I heard the man's voice again, repeating the same phrase over and over until it didn't sound like words anymore, just a pattern that made my stomach twist. "Keep driving, keep driving, keep driving." And I did, because I knew if I stopped, whatever was behind those trees would finally step onto the road. I had driven so long that I stopped feeling tired, my hands numb against the wheel, my eyes fixed on the endless ribbon of asphalt curving through the fog. But every time I circled back to the same exit sign, I felt a little less like myself. The lines on the road seemed to pulse faintly in rhythm with the hum under the earth, and the air inside the truck had taken on a strange heaviness, like I was breathing through wet fabric. The radio had been silent for hours when it suddenly flickered on by itself. No static, no music, just a faint whispering under the noise of the engine. I leaned closer, trying to catch words, but they shifted like breath against glass soft. Indistinct, I turned the knob to shut it off, but before I could, the whisper said something clear enough to cut through me. Stop looking in the mirrors. I froze because I wasn't looking at them until then. But once I heard it, I couldn't stop myself. My eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror, and at first all I saw was the dark, empty road behind me stretching back into fog. But after a moment, I noticed something off. The reflection didn't match the turn ahead. The curve in the mirror bent the opposite way, like it showed a different road entirely, one that disappeared into complete darkness. Then there was a flicker, a flash of movement in the mirror, something in the back seat. I turned so fast my neck cracked, but the seat was empty. I stared for a long time, my breath clouding in the cold air. Inside the cab, before facing forward again, the hum under the tires had changed, toned deeper, slower, like it was syncing with my heartbeat. I passed a patch of forest and thought I saw shapes standing between the trees, but they didn't move. They never did. They just watched. I told myself to keep driving, but every few minutes I found my gaze drifting back to the mirror. I couldn't help it. There was a presence behind me. I could feel it, the way the air shifted. Slightly, the faintest sound of fabric moving, like someone adjusting in a seat. Then I caught it clearly for the first time, not a reflection, but a silhouette, a person sitting in the middle of the back seat. Behind me, their outline faint like a shadow made of mist. They leaned slightly forward, their head tilted, and even though the road was dark, I could tell their eyes were open too wide and unblinking, staring directly into the mirror at me. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I didn't look away. I couldn't. It was like if I looked anywhere else, they would move closer, their mouth open slowly. And the whisper came again, but this time it wasn't from the radio. It was inside the truck, between the seats. You missed your turn. The air around me dropped in temperature. Fast frost spreading on the inside of the windows, my breath forming clouds. I turned off the heater, but it didn't help. I could feel it kind of pulling at my chest, a pressure building that made it hard to breathe. I looked up once more, and the figure was closer, its face now visible, a blank expression. No mouth, no nose, no features at all. Just skin, and those eyes black and endless. I swerved the truck off the road, the tires screaming as I came to a stop. The figure gone again. When I looked back the road behind me empty, I sat there shaking my fingers, gripping the ignition, afraid to turn it off, afraid that if I did, the silence would let that thing speak again. Outside the truck, the fog was thick enough to choke. I could barely see past the headlights. The road curved down, slightly disappearing into a pale wash of mist. I thought about stepping out, but something in me resisted, like the air outside wasn't air at all, but water waiting to pull me under. So I sat there and waited, listening. That's when I noticed it, the reflection of the headlights bouncing off something further down the curve, like glass or metal, but not steady. It moved slightly side to side, almost swaying. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, and for a moment I could see it clearly. It was another truck identical to mine, same color, same model, same dented front fender, and through its windshield I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat, their head slumped forward, their hands limp on the wheel. And when I flashed my lights, the figure looked up, And it was me, every detail, identical, my own face staring back, eyes empty, mouth slightly open like a doll, my reflection from the cooler door, the same one that had told me to keep driving. And now I understood what it meant, because when I blinked, that other me smiled slowly, unnaturally, his head tilting to the side, as if waiting for me to move. I shifted into reverse, panicking the tires, catching on loose gravel before gripping the asphalt. And then I saw movement in the mirror again, but not one figure this time. Dozens, all sitting in the back seat, all facing forward, their heads slightly tilted, identical faces staring straight through me, their hands resting neatly in their laps. I couldn't breathe. I stomped on the gas, the truck swerving back onto the road, and the hum grew louder, shaking the frame like a heartbeat. I passed sign after sign, but none of them had names anymore, only one phrase written in streaked, reflective paint. Keep driving I did for what felt like hours, until the fog broke slightly ahead, and I saw faint lights glowing in the distance, a row of street lamps flickering weakly, lining a small stretch of what looked like houses. I thought maybe I'd finally found town a way out, but as I got closer, I realized the houses weren't real. Their shapes were flat, like photographs hung in the air, paper thin illusions catching the light. Wrong, the kind of wrong that makes your stomach turn. And just behind them was something darker, a stretch of emptiness that absorbed the glow from my headlights, the edge of the world. I stopped the truck, the hum fading for the first time, and in that silence I could hear something behind me, the sound of someone shifting in their seat, slow, deliberate. I turned the mirror down with one shaking hand and saw one of them still there, still watching, its mouth moving soundlessly. And though I couldn't hear the words, I could read them clearly. You're not supposed to stop. Then everything around me went black, the engine dead, the lights gone, the road erased, leaving me sitting in that cold silence, knowing that whatever was behind me was no longer waiting in the reflection, but right there, breathing softly in the dark space just inches away from the back of my neck. When the lights of the highway vanished completely, I thought I blacked out, but then faint shapes began to emerge again, dim yellow lights in the distance like lanterns burning through fog. I drove toward them, though I couldn't remember making the decision to the truck, moved as if guided by something else steering me. Through the empty night, the hum beneath the road still pulsed faintly, now slow like a tired heartbeat. The lights turned out to be from a gas station, a single building standing alone beside the highway. No signs, no name, no pumps that looked like anything made in this decade. The glass of the windows was fogged over, but the fluorescent light inside flickered weakly, casting the faint outline of movement. I pulled up to the front, gravel crunching under the tires. The air outside smelled wrong, damp, like rust and burned oil. The sign above the door said open, though none of the letters worked. The flicker of electricity behind them looked like something breathing. I stepped out of the truck for the first time in hours, and the cold hit me immediately, thick and heavy, as if the air itself wanted me gone. I told myself I just needed directions, maybe even a map, something to break the loop of the highway. But as I reached for the door, I noticed the handle was already warm, like someone had just used it inside. It was brighter, but not warmer. The hum of a refrigerator and buzzing lights filled the silence. There was no one at the counter, but someone had clearly been there, a half-smoked cigarette still burning in an ashtray, the faint curl of smoke rising in the stale air. I looked around the aisles, every one of them perfectly stocked with things that didn't belong, cans with blank labels, bottles with no markings, packets of food that had no smell, no weight. I called out, but the sound seemed to get swallowed halfway across the room. It didn't echo, just vanished like the Air refused to carry my voice. Then from the back of the store, I heard it, the steady squeak of a cart's wheels. Turning, the sound came closer, one aisle at a time, deliberate, patient. When it reached the end of the aisle, the cart stopped, and I saw the person pushing it. She was tall, too tall. Her head nearly grazing the ceiling. Her face was shadowed by the flickering light, but I could see her uniform, a faded blue jacket with a name tag I couldn't read. She turned the cart toward me, and I realized it was empty. No groceries, no supplies, just a single small television sitting in the basket, screen dark, but humming faintly. She didn't blink, she didn't move, she just stood there with her head slightly tilted, as if waiting for me to speak. When I stepped back, her voice came not from her mouth, but from the hum of the refrigerator behind me. You missed the turn. I froze, because I had heard those words before, whispered from the back seat of my truck. I didn't answer, I just moved slowly toward the door, but as I did, every fluorescent light above me flickered out one by one, following my steps toward the exit, until the only light left was from that small television in her car. It turned on suddenly, static filling the room, and through it I saw the highway again, looping endlessly, the camera moving fast as if mounted on a vehicle. But when the image shifted, I saw myself in it, behind the wheel, my eyes dark, my face blank, the headlights carving through the same fog. I had just left the woman step closer, the hum growing louder until it drowned out everything. And when I looked down, her feet weren't touching the floor. She was standing slightly above it, toes pointed down, arms limp at her sides, like she was hanging from something invisible. The static cut to black for half a second, then showed the gas station itself, seen from above the roof, collapsing inward, the lights going out, the whole structure rotting in seconds until nothing was left but an empty lot. I turned to run, but the door was gone, replaced by another aisle that led nowhere, the shelves bending slightly inward as though the whole building was breathing. I ran between them, knocking over blank cans and plastic wrappers, the air growing thicker, heavier, each step echoing longer than it should have. When I found the door again, it was already open. The night outside, pitch black. No stars, no road, no horizon, just my truck sitting a few feet away with its headlights dimly glowing. I didn't remember leaving them on. I didn't even remember shutting off the engine, but I got in anyway and slammed the door. The instant my hands touched the wheel, the headlights died, and for a few seconds there was nothing but the sound of my breathing. Then the radio turned itself on again. No static this time, just the faint sound of a woman's voice humming softly, the same low tune from the gas station, the same rhythm as the hum under the tires, the same beat as my heart. The headlights flickered back to life, and I saw the road stretching ahead, smooth, endless, disappearing in a fog like always. But this time I didn't recognize the exit sign that appeared up ahead. It wasn't the one that had been looping. It was new. The letters were smeared, but I could still make them out. Last stop. I wanted to drive past it, but the wheel turned on its own, the truck gliding toward its slow, deliberate, no resistance like the road, was deciding for me. The hum beneath me deepened, the kind of sound you feel inside your ribs as I passed under the exit light. The fog cleared for only a moment, long enough for me to see that there were no roads on either side, just endless black water stretching in every direction, and on the surface faint reflections moved slowly like people walking upside down beneath the surface, following the road that wasn't there. When I looked into the rearview mirror, they were still walking, and one of them had my face. I thought I had imagined the water. I told myself it was fog or some trick of the headlights. But the more I drove, the louder it became. Not rain, not wind, a muffled sound beneath the road, like something heavy moving under the surface. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, my eyes fixed ahead, but The hum that had haunted me since the first night had changed now. It was mixed with a second rhythm, slower, deeper, like breathing from below. The air inside the truck had gone strange again, thicker with every mile I drove. It smelled faintly of salt and rust, and something else, something older. I rolled down the window, but instead of cold wind, the air that came in was wet, as if the night itself was sweating. I glanced once at the mirror and almost ran off the road because the reflection didn't show the inside of my truck anymore. It showed the highway from above, a thin gray ribbon cutting across a flat black ocean. The horizon was gone, replaced by nothing but that water stretching forever. No towns, no exits, just that same faded sign glowing weakly in the distance. Last stop, I should have turned back, but the wheel didn't respond anymore. The truck moved forward, steady, unbothered, the engine too quiet for how fast I was going. I looked down and saw the fuel gauge had stopped moving. It wasn't on empty, it wasn't on full, it just hovered, the needle vibrating like it couldn't decide what was real. When I passed under the last stop sign, the world changed in a way I can't explain. The lights of the truck flickered, the road dipped slightly downward, and the sound outside shifted. The hum became hollow. The air inside the cab felt heavy, as if gravity had changed direction. I looked out the side window, and my stomach dropped because the ground wasn't beside me anymore. It was above me. The highway was upside down, stretched along the ceiling of an enormous black tunnel, and beneath me the road was perfectly mirrored, reflecting my headlights like water. My truck kept driving like it was caught between both versions of the same world, one real, one not. I couldn't tell which was which. Any more shapes began to appear in the reflection below, faint outlines of people walking in the opposite direction, matching my speed. Their movements were slow, jerky, heads turned toward me, faces blurred as though seen through rippling water. One by one, they began to look up, their heads tilting backward until they stared directly at me through the mirror road, their eyes black, empty, like holes punched through glass. Then the radio turned on again, a whisper too faint to understand at first, until I realized it was speaking in rhythm with a hum. It wasn't random. It was repeating a phrase over and over. You missed the exit below. The moment I heard it, the truck began to slow on its own, the headlights dimming until only the faintest glow remained. I pressed the gas pedal. Nothing changed. I turned the wheel. It stayed still. I felt the road tilt slightly, the reflection below me shifting closer and closer until it touched the tires like I was sinking without moving. Then everything went silent. No hum, no engine, no breathing, just silence and the sensation of falling. Even though I was still inside the truck, my hands gripping the wheel, the water reflection wasn't a reflection anymore. It was swallowing me. I don't remember hitting it. I don't remember impact. One moment I was driving, and the next I was floating the world, muffled and heavy. I could still see faint light from the dashboard flickering and through the windshield, dark shapes drifting slowly like shadows, suspended in ink. They moved closer until I could see what they were. Cars, thousands of them hovering at different angles in the black water doors, open seats, empty, all of them facing downward, and between them the figures walking upside down along invisible roads, following each other in endless loops. My truck settled among them, the lights dying completely. I tried the door. It opened too easily. Water didn't rush in, though it should have. There was no pressure, just a void waiting. When I stepped out, the surface beneath my feet felt solid like wet glass. I looked down and saw the same highway stretching infinitely below me, lined with the same exits, repeating forever. Last stop, last stop, last stop. I walked for what felt like hours, or maybe only seconds, the hum beneath me vibrating through my bones, until I saw movement Ahead, a figure standing under one of the flickering exit signs, waiting unmoving as I got. Closer I saw it was me, the other me, stood perfectly. Still head, slightly tilted eyes black and hollow, the same emptiness I had seen in the reflection before he raised one hand slowly pointing back toward the truck. And when I turned, I saw the driver's seat wasn't empty anymore. Someone was sitting there gripping the wheel, staring straight ahead, eyes wide, face slack pale as bone. I walked back and looked through the window and realized with a kind of slow, cold certainty that the person behind the wheel was still me, the original one, still driving, still trapped, still looping endlessly on that highway above. And as I watched the headlights flicker back on the road, reappeared, and I felt myself being pulled backward, my vision folding inward until I was back behind the wheel again, the hum returning louder than ever, the world outside dark, but solid again. The exit sign passed by once more, and I tried to scream, but the sound didn't come out because the voice that spoke this time wasn't mine. You never left. The headlights blinked, and the world ahead dissolved, the road curving back on itself until it formed a perfect circle, the same sign, the same fog, the same hum, repeating over and over, the reflection of my own truck visible in the mirrors, moving in perfect sync with me, except for one difference in the reflection. The passenger seat wasn't empty anymore, and every time I blinked, the figure sitting there turned its head a little more until finally it was looking directly at me, with my own face smiling, just before the road curved out of sight again, and everything went black.